had to. This one's so embarrassing I don't even like looking at it. Oh, here's George Alexopoulos. This is the guy who did the Biden You Ain't White comic, and then since then has done 50 comics where he draws himself as a 4-foot tall gremlin man sexually assaulting women, and then the women like it. All that work for nothing, says a guy with a Bussin' for Biden shirt, which is a good shirt. And then Kamala says, never give up. Let me show you how it's done. And then she attempts to deep throat the Washington Monument. This is insane, right? Like, can you imagine where your mind would have to be at to arrive at this? It's a total non sequitur. You might as well go at this from like Biden's perspective. Like Biden might as well be the guy trying to like deep throat the, what's even the point? The point is that Kamala Harris is a woman, so she sucks dick. That's it. That's the level of imagination. But I still think it's indicative of something here, right? Like when presented, like think of this from the Republican perspective, okay? So George Alexopoulos is unabashedly partisan. He is right wing. He's a fascist, right? From his perspective, the future of the country, and maybe even the white race, hinges on Donald Trump winning. A massive pivotal election is coming up. Joe Biden drops out, and he's been replaced with Kamala Harris. This is like the fight of a lifetime. His neurons are firing. How do I, a partisan comic artist, engage with this in a way that serves my interest? And this is what he came up with. I really do think that the reflexive sexism of Republicans is going to consistently get in the way of their ability to attack Kamala Harris. Do you think women seeing this are going to be particularly moved towards the Republican Party? And what might Nick Fuentes' comment towards Harris be? Well, I think if anything, that's actually indicative. The Groyper movement is, and I'm speaking charitably here, 100% unfaithful men. It might be 101% unfaithful men. Now, historically, fascism has basically always been kind of bedrocked by men, but there were plenty of women Nazis. You might ask yourself, why are there basically no women Nazis? You might be able to think of some grifter like public figures, and I can too. But in terms of the general electorate, like the regular median voter, if you take a look at the breakdown of people's positions and perspectives, there are very, very, very few far-right women. Regular voters. Do you think Candace Owens has a female audience? Do you think Melanie Mack has a female audience? No, they have male audiences. So why are there basically no women on the far right? My suggestion is that the reason for this is because the far right is performatively hateful towards women to the extent that they basically can't even join the movement. You know? The Proud Boys is a men's only club, like by name, you know? A gentleman's club, they call it. They despise women. One of the most effective ways that you build a far-right political group is by appealing to incels. This is literally something Steve Bannon explicitly tried to do. Unfaithful young men tend to be emotionally fragile and hateful and resentful, and it's pretty easy to pull them in one direction or another. So given all of that, I feel like it's genuinely a pretty huge disadvantage for them to be up against a woman. Women are, after all, 50% of the vote in this country. I know it may be easy to forget that because when your political engagement online basically entirely comes down to you arguing with men, which it does, by the way. My audience is like 92% men, though given the fact that YouTube's gender statistics don't really track whether or not people transition, and sometimes it feels like half my community is trans women, I don't actually know. It might just be half my VGG chat is trans women and the broader like YouTube watcher community is, you know what I mean. The online political engagement is overwhelmingly a men's game, not because women don't care about politics, but to be fair, you have to be kind of a little bit of a masochistic to get involved in politics online. I'm speaking from my own perspective here. I'm speaking to yours. You aren't the exception. You're included in this. You kind of have to be a little bit. You guys could be jerking off or playing like, you know, the high, like Payday with your friends, you know, you could be on Fortnite. And here you are watching a politics streamer. You're crazy, dude. You all get the point that I'm making here, right? This stuff does not work to their benefit. I mean, much to this point right here. JD Vance says Kamala Harris is a childless cat lady who is miserable with her life because she doesn't have children. I'm not going to look into the article. I saw him say this in this interview. Literally, like, you're a woman, why aren't you in the kitchen? You know, this is the VP. Literally, like, Doesn't she call herself Mamala? I mean, she is all of our mothers. Also, yeah, I does she not does she have, I don't actually know, because I don't look at a woman and think like I need to know whether or not she has children. I don't really give a shit. I don't actually know whether she has kids. She has stepchildren. That counts as having kids, though it might not to the right. Yeah, Cole and Ella, her two stepchildren. These insults are not going to land well with the female voter. Oh, I saw this one as well. What does this even mean, man? How it started to how it's going. And it's Kamala giving the Joe a blood. How much of a porn addict do you have to be? Like, genuinely, you're like a degenerate porn addict to be thinking this. It's offensive. It is offensive, but it's not offensive because it's like, I would be less offended if a porn artist drew like, here's my drawing of Kamala Harris and she's got like huge tits and a 4-inch waist or something. Like, I don't like, if somebody did that, I would think it's funny, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm coconut pilled and it's Kamala Harris like with two big coconuts in front of her tits. We're like, okay, whatever. Like, you know, that this is like an expected outcome. This is like genuinely psychotic. This is serial killer behavior. I only picked a few tweets, by the way. Like, there's a ton of this stuff. If you go under the comments of basically any Republican post on Kamala Harris, anything that's about her like laugh or anything about her as a person, not about her political record, there are a huge number of unfavorable like middle-aged divorced dads who take selfies in their trucks with the shades on, you know, like talking about her in like a really disgusting sexual way, you know? And women are the one minority that are equally proportioned in every state except for Alaska, you know? In every other type of minority basically is kind of like unevenly distributed. As we know, all the trans people are in Seattle, Chicago, and New York City. Racial minorities are distributed in a wide variety of ways. But when it comes to gender, with the exception of Alaska, like that's pretty much like evenly spaced. So why wouldn't Alaska have an even amount of women? Because a lot of people only move up to Alaska for seasonal work in fishing or in drilling. And those people are almost always men. I think Alaska has like 55-45 in terms of men, women. Alaska gender ratio. Yes, in Alaska, there are 110 men for every 100 women, which is a pretty significant difference. That's more of a gender imbalance than, say, for example, China, which has a significant imbalance. The difference, of course, being that that's all of China with its 1.4 billion people, whereas Alaska, usually the men, like, go back to other. That's horrifying. Yeah, Alaska also has a lot of rape. Let's not think about it. Can you explain how Christian conservatives are so obsessed with sex and porn? Because conservatism, the conservative ideology does not allow for women to be people. The entire red pill movement, every conservative political movement that talks about women talks about them as anything other than people. They're incubators for children, there's child rearers, they're trophies that hang off the arms of men as a symbol of status. From the red pill perspective, they're simple, semi-human animal creatures that are very easily triggered by or like excited by certain inputs that you can factor in. They're not really like people with complex desires. They're consequences of evolutionary psychology that can be exploited for their resource, which is pussy. None of these ideologies really factor in women being people, like humans, you know? And as a consequence of that, if they're not people, then they're usually sex objects. The less of a person a woman is, the easier it is to just reflexively sexualize them, which is why you see stuff like this. I don't think a normal, healthy human mind could ever produce this. I think a normal, healthy human mind could produce like a funny drawing of Kamala Harris with coconuts held up in front of her tits, because I think that you can do that in a kind of like, you know, half because Kamala Harris is like a hot mom and half because, you know, it's like funny. This, to me, there's nothing erotic about it. It's meant to be demeaning. The only point of this is Kamala Harris is a woman, therefore she is like blowing dicks to the top. It's not meant to elicit arousal, it's meant to put her down. And I don't think a healthy mind would ever reflexively defer to that without any supporting evidence. There's no evidence that Kamala Harris gave head to get to where she is. If there was a political candidate who was like, I don't know, obviously sleeping their way to the top, something which is basically never proven, by the way. There are plenty of corrupt politicians who don't deserve to be where they are. Most of them are men, and nobody ever goes, oh, you your way to the top.